Welcome back to the Caves of Hoxie's, everybody. Welcome back to Deep Rock Galactic, where today we're going to be taking a look at 5 of the strongest builds for the GK2 Assault Rifle. This is Scout's beginning rifle, and this is a pretty good weapon. This is a weapon that does pretty much every job that you would want it to do. It is an assault rifle, so it works pretty well at close range, long range. It's fairly accurate. It's got a lot of good mods to it. So let's start out with these 5 best builds. These are all in quotations. There's a lot of really good builds in Deep Rock, so I would recommend that you try experimenting with them. And I have plenty of videos going over different builds, whether they be more fun builds or strong builds, or kind of a combination of each. In this, we're going to be going over the build for the weapon and then the build for the secondary as well. So let's hop right into this with our very first build. For this, we're going to be using the balance overclocked firing mechanism. This one is probably my favorite of the GK2's overclocks, and it's a very simple one. This one gives you more rate of fire in exchange for double the amount of recoil. Very straightforward. The GK2 luckily does not have very much recoil, so the increase to recoil here isn't really that noticeable. And if you really find that it's that bad, you can also take the recoil reduction for the GK2, which will actually level this back out to what the standard GK2 is. So that can be pretty useful. This is the build that I'm going to be running with it. This isn't my favorite build with it, but I think this is probably the strongest build. This kind of covers everything where you have faster reload, you do more damage, you have a higher rate of fire, you do extra damage from weak spots. It's a really good rifle for anything at close and medium range. It can work out to longer range, especially against big targets. It's still really easy to hit them. Against smaller targets out to really long range, it can be a little bit awkward, but that's not usually a problem for Scout because you can get fairly close to enemies and always be fighting at medium range. It's also really good for spraying down enemies when they do get close. That increased rate of fire is really, really nice. This kind of covers everything. The only kind of downside to this overclock is that it can run through ammo pretty quickly. You can take a secondary to make up for that. For a secondary for this, I took shape shells with the boomstick. This is a really strong overclock at medium and long range for the boomstick, and the boomstick is just naturally going to be good at close range even with an overclock like this because you still have the cone of damage. And even though your pellets are condensed, you still have a fairly big hitbox. So you can actually use this at longer ranges to apply pressure to enemies. The build that I'm going to be running with it is a pretty straightforward boomstick build, although I do have extra ammo here because you lose out on some ammo taking shape shells. You don't need to be taking ammo in both tiers if you don't want to. You could go with more pellets in tier 3. That's a pretty good option too, or more damage in tier 1 if you feel like that's really necessary. This boomstick allows me to use it at close, medium, and even out to long range. This is actually really good for picking off enemies, and it can be really strong on like Mac Plagues because you can hit them in the belly really easy. For our second build, we have the AI Stability Engine overclock. This is an unstable overclock, and this is probably the GK2's strongest overclock at the moment. It's really good, even though I would say that the last overclock is personally my favorite. I think that one is just more fun, but this one is really strong. This one decreases your spread and decreases recoil to basically nothing. You are pretty much pinpoint accurate with the assault rifle. It also gives you more weak spot damage, although it does nerf your rate of fire and your damage slightly. However, since the GK2's rework, this weapon has gotten way better, and this overclock has gotten much better because of that, especially because some of the tiers have moved around. So the build I'm running with AI Stability Engine is this, where we have increased rate of fire in tiers 1 and in 5. That way we make up for the lack of rate of fire that this one has, and you can take the damage in tier 2 and make up for any lost damage that you have there. This one is really good. It's really strong, and it deals a lot of damage to enemies at really any range. This one is fantastic at very long range. It's also really good at medium range. Close range is where it kind of isn't as good, but it's still quite strong. It's just that this one doesn't have as high of a rate of fire as some of the other builds. That's why we have a secondary to kind of make up for that kind of close range where things are getting right on top of us. And for that, we're going to be using double barrel for the boomstick. This is a really strong overclock, and it's a really fun overclock since this one got reworked. So this one I have built for extra shockwave damage and more ammo, and I'm only going to be using this one at close range or to fire at big enemies at kind of medium range. I'm probably not going to be using this at long range unless I'm just out of ammo with everything, and I might as well throw some shells their way. This is one of my favorite builds for the boomstick as well. It is very, very good. You can use the assault rifle out to medium and long range very well. Once enemies start getting up close, pull out the boomstick, blast them away. It's all you got to do. You don't really have to think too much about it. Moving on to our third build, we have more of a specialized build. This is going to go with Bolts of Mercy, which is a balanced overclock that gets you more damage when an enemy is affected by a status effect. And since the changes to the GK2, this covers almost every status in the game now, which is really good. It used to not cover as many, but now you have even more coverage. At the downside of taking away some of your magazine. This isn't such a big deal because we're going to be building a bigger magazine, so you're still going to be less than what the regular GK2 can have at usually 30. This one's going to be at 24. Not such a big deal there, and this one is really, really strong for a team setting because in a team setting, there's pretty much always going to be some sort of element or some sort of status effect that's going on. If you have a driller, all of his primaries do it. So you got that covered right there, and you can just get more damage thanks to it. And the other classes as well, if you just have more scouts on your team, are very likely to have status effects as well. And all of your grenades count towards this too, so you can trigger it as well. You can even trigger it with the GK2 if you want to take the stun. I didn't do that with my build. My build is set up kind of like my previous builds have been with the GK2. This one is just built for more damage and more damage per second. I'm primarily going to be relying on my secondary to add status effects to them, assuming that I'm not playing this in a team, in which case the team can kind of cover that. And so for a secondary, I'm going to be taking ice bolts with the crossbow. You could also take fire bolts and build it the exact same way. There's not too much of a difference here. Ice bolts are going to be better on dreadnought missions, which is what I took this one on, at least for this footage. But if you weren't just specifically going on dreadnought missions, fire bolts work really well too. And with my cryo bolts, I'm also bringing pheromone bolts, so those can also trigger this. Main way that I'm going to be using this is I'm going to be using the assault rifle just as the regular assault rifle, but if there is bigger targets, I'm going to be trying to stick them with a frost bolt, or I'm going to be trying to stick them with a pheromone bolt and then hose them down with the assault rifle. Very straightforward. If I'm playing in a team, I likely won't have to worry about that so much because somebody's going to have some sort of status effect going. And even in solo, Bosco could still have electricity on him, so you can trigger it that way too. There's a lot of ways you can get a lot of value out of Bullets of Mercy, and it's especially strong on Dreadnought missions right now. For our fourth build, we're going to be using Electric Reload. This is an unstable overclock for the GK2 that applies electricity whenever you reload after you've shot an enemy. This also kind of got buffed, which is pretty cool, so it deals more damage over time, or at least the initial burst deals a little bit more damage. That's really good. The damage over time is really nice. One bullet from this can actually kill a grunt from full health on any difficulty, besides maybe has 5+ if you have the more tanky enemies. I haven't actually tried that, but up to has 5 you can kill a grunt with just one bullet from the GK2, making this the most ammo efficient version of the GK2, at least in theory. You don't really have to be playing the GK2 like that. It's really nice when you are playing in a team and you can get a bunch of bugs clustered and you just kind of spray into them and then let the reload go and have the electricity take down. It does save a lot of ammo there, but I wouldn't really recommend you trying to stick each individual grunt with one bullet and then try to reload, because there's just going to be too much stuff going on. It's going to be easy to get confused as to which grunt you've hit and which ones you haven't. So I'd recommend just using the assault rifle like you normally would, but then using it to just kind of spray into crowds when there are crowds there so you can get more value out of this. This one I've built a little bit differently because I've built this for extra ammo. We don't really need more damage on this. The damage is mostly going to be coming from the electricity, so we can use it a little bit more often than we otherwise would. For a secondary, I decided to pair this with embedded detonators on the Zhukovs. This will give me a lot more single target damage, so if I need to spray down big enemies quickly, I can do that. It also pairs pretty well because I can trigger the electricity from this and then get even more damage from the tier 5s with the embedded detonators, which is kind of nice, or at least from the initial damage, not really from the detonators. Either way, it gives my DPS a little bit more. It's also pretty strong if you want to pair this build with like an IFG, because that'll have even more slowdown since the electricity already slows things down, and it stacks even further with something like embedded detonators where they get additional damage on them, so that's pretty strong. And then for our fifth and final build, we are not actually going to be using the new overclock, the burst fire overclock. That one, the devs have said that they were probably going to be changing it and reworking it, or at least buffing it in some way. That was actually covered just today. This one is going to be going with the gas recycling, which is a clean overclock that just gets you more rate of fire, which is really nice, and a faster reload speed. And then I'm just going to be building my assault rifle like I normally would. You can build this with any of the builds that we've shown already though. This one is just a straight upgrade to the assault rifle and it doesn't come with any downside. And then for a secondary, I decided to pair this with Trifork Volley with the crossbow. This will give me more damage and it will give me a lot more burst damage when I need to. I built this also with electricity bolts. This is better for big single targets because you can stick 2 electricity bolts into an enemy, walk around to the backside of them, assuming that's where their weak spot is, and then just launch the Trifork into them and you'll deal really high damage, even higher if you want to pair it with something like the IFG. That's also really good, but really any of the grenades work really well with this one. For this build, I'm going to be using the assault rifle to clear up pretty much everything at every range, unless there's big enemies, in which case then I'm going to swap over to the Trifork just so that I can deal with them quickly. You could also take this with like pheromone bolts, and that would work really well if you want even more crowd control, and then you can kind of just be picking and choosing which enemies you want to be fighting, then use the Trifork for the bigger enemies, and then use the GK2 to clean up all the enemies affected by the pheromone bolts. GK2 is pretty straightforward, and it's always been a really good general purpose weapon, so I hope these builds kind of help you out. Thank you guys so very much for watching this. Please tell me what weapon you'd like to see next for 5 of the best builds. Thank you guys so very much for watching this. I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye, everybody!